Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, one and all. Welcome to another edition of The Smoking Barrel. I'm Rustin Edwards, based in Geneva, with illustrious world traveling co host, Mr. Matt Stanley, back in Dubai.
Back in Dubai. Yes,
A
I
bit
was
of
in
a holiday
Thailand.
month for both of us traveling about doing our family duties, familial duties.
Yeah. I was in Thailand. We went beginning of July. I got back on Saturday, um, and then going away again on Sunday, just to the UK. So for meetings in London, which I haven't been to since pre-conflict. IP week was the last time I was in the UK, and it seems like a lot has happened since then. A lot has happened since we last recorded. A lot has happened since this morning. So where to bloody begin, Edwards?
Well, I think we always take a look. Let's take a look at the old flat price level. Because I think that tells the
Yeah,
story right there. Because I think last time we recorded, we were in a downward shift. Peace was breaking out everywhere in the world, except maybe in Ukraine. Crude was down back into the 70s. Cracks were still strong,
yeah.
but they've gotten stronger.
Well, yeah, because I mean, as much as we haven't recorded, obviously haven't written commentary for a while. Been doing these little skits every now and then. But when we last recorded, 22nd of June, flat price was at 77.90. We're at 88.43. But when I last recorded, so I've got some numbers here. When I last recorded, sorry, when I last wrote commentary, which was the 1st of July. Brent was trading at 73.18, so 20% higher we are now. WTI is 19% higher. Gas oil, like you just said, is 28% higher. So those cracks are still, I don't even want to say doing well because it's so expensive. So at the moment, $1,199 a ton is $161 a barrel for diesel.
Yeah. And that's just a case of the fact that we've got more crude than the world can refine.
Yeah,
And so we've had this downward pressure on crude oil, upward pressure on products. And, part of the whole product dynamic has been Ukraine and Russia, not so much the Middle East.
yeah,
Ukraine has, I've read, reportedly have taken over 60% of Russian refining capacity offline. Russia has become a net importer of product, not exporter anymore. So they're
yeah.
bringing in gas oil and gasoline to help sustain their supply crisis that they have in the entire country.
Yeah, I was just looking at we wrote something on this last night. So let me share my screen so I can have a little
Have
look.
at it, sir.
Okay, this is my colleague Emmanuel. We wrote this last night. Can you see this? Black Sea tanker attacks interrupt stronger crude loadings. So look, this is Novorossiysk monthly exports, and they've been, they're pretty high, but loading at Shisgaris averaged 1 million barrels a day, slightly above in June and 60% above the average. So that momentum was interrupted on the 20th of July. So where are we now? These are the boats that were attacked. Public reports the Nordic Zenith was damaged by two drones on 17th of July. This one, the Asia and the Nissos EOS were then, or IOS, were then attacked while loading at CPC on the 19th. So, I mean, look, it's still a
And I
fluid
think the last thing I
situation.
read was that CPC has suspended all loadings for the time being because there could be damage to the SPMs.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. So I'll have a look at that where we are. Um, yeah, yeah. Look, that's where we are. I mean, look. I don't, I, I want to try and be optimistic, but it's really bloody hard at the moment because the issues that we've got now, this is our straight off Hormuz crossing. So this was pre-conflict. I've shown you this. Then we saw an uptick when we saw that there was an MOU in place, the ceasefire was announced April, whatever that was. Um, and then loading started to reoccur, or transit started to reoccur here. But look, we're back down to five yesterday.
Yeah, but that's just the case that the Iranians started attacking vessels using the southern exit entry route,
Yeah.
not using the Persian Gulf Strait Authority's approved routing.
Well, this
Um,
is it. This so
and that's
20th.
what's kicked this whole thing back off again.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, it's going to go into marine traffic, so you can see what's going on there. Can you see this all right?
Uh-huh.
marine traffic. It's be quiet.
Well, it looks basically how it looked from the month of February into the beginning of June
Yeah,
before the
which
MOU was signed. I mean, you have a trickle of ships going in and out, primarily those that have an agreement with the Iranian National IRGC for safe passage. But not, it looks like nothing is using the southern route that was designed by the United States Navy.
yeah,
And also we've got the reimposition of the U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports,
down
which
here.
will curtail traffic.
Yeah. Don't know what all these are. These are fishing vessels, I think. There was a an attack. Hang on, let me put it up from the UKMTO last night. Um, I
Yeah, there's
think,
one off of Oman.
yeah, well, I think what seems to be happening is this is the danger zone here.
Yeah.
This is really what seems because so there must be some. This is I don't know. I don't know, but it just regardless of how it is actually happening, where it's happening, is kind of irrelevant. Without wishing to trivialize the situation, it's the fact that it's still fucking happening. Sorry, I'm going to swear, but we're exactly where we were, right? We are no better here than we were here.
Yep.
In fact, I'd argue that things are worse
Well,
because
I would say from a global oil supply perspective, it is worse because you couple what's going on with the Middle East with what's also been going on with Ukraine taking a devastating hit against Russian oil infrastructure and Russian
yeah,
oil refining capacity. That those two big dynamics have upended the entire oil market. I'm a bit surprised, but not too surprised that crude oil is only in the 80s. $88. We briefly touched
I
$91 yesterday, but it sold off on the quote unquote hope of headlines that there'll be some miraculous peace agreement again between Russia, Iran, and the United States. I don't know if that's really going to happen because it sounds from the rhetoric from both sides that um, the attacks will continue, and they continued last night, even though there were talks scheduled in Islamabad, in
yeah,
Pakistan.
but this is the thing, right? And this is where I want to sound optimistic, but we've got to be realistic. Talks in Islamabad that someone's going to get right, don't matter because what's coming out of them is it's just not something tangible the market can go, oh, that's good. Because the mediator, Pakistan, Qatar, I get, send something out saying we are going to get them around the table. So where are the US? They're nowhere. They're not even saying we will attend those talks as well. So those headlines are irrelevant, unfortunately. I understand that people want within the region, have obviously got a vested interest to keep things as calm as possible. But unless the US and Iran get round the table together, whoever that's mediated by doesn't matter, apart from kudos to whoever's going to broke that deal. Unless they're both around the table, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
And what we've seen now, right, you picked up on it, the Russia-Ukraine issue was always there, sadly. And like I've said to you before, people have said to me, oh yeah, I forgot about that war. But it's got to the point now where Ukraine have become extremely aggressive on
Well,
Russian energy infrastructure.
and this was a whole change in tactic. I mean, they announced, I think about 15 days ago, the 40 days of strikes against Russia, where they were going to push drone attacks against Russia infrastructure all around the region, all around
Yeah,
the country, and they've been doing that successfully. Russia had made the strategic choice of putting air defenses around the seat of government and has left the remainder of the country fairly vulnerable to long-range attacks. And so you've got attacks from drones going 20,000, 2,000 kilometers from the border of Ukraine into Russia, hitting oil refineries, hitting logistics hubs. Um, it points to a pretty dramatic change in the whole oil balance coming out of Russia and into Russia now.
but I agree. But here's a question for you then, and rhetorical. Where does this go, this Russia-Ukraine thing? Like, it seems to me like there is no objective anymore. Russia don't. It just seems to be like a very sort of aerial energy infrastructure centered war because it is a
Well,
war.
that
But
that's
where's it going?
but that's the tactic. And Ukraine has taken the tactic to disable and destroy the Russian ability for economic survival. So they've hit tankers, they've hit about 180 tankers, these little shuttle tankers that work the rivers going into Azov. They've hit other
Yeah,
tankers that are in the Black Sea. They've struck the oil terminals, the oil loading, so and the refineries and what have you, because they've realized they can't go head to head to Russia. They just can't. They don't have the manpower.
But they are.
But well, they're going ahead to because they're using alternative means of attack, i.e., strangling them financially, and also using drones versus using people to bring the war home to Russia.
But
And that's
it's
been quite successful because they have pushed the boundaries of drones to win again. They're long range attack machines now versus what they were, 3, 4 years ago. Now, that change in tactic, unfortunately, has disabled the Russian oil juggernaut, and that's going to really and that's really causing a big upend in the whole economies because Russia's no longer exporting their 3 to 4 million barrels a day of diesel to the world. They're importing diesel. And that's a
so
major shift. And that's why we've got these $160 a barrel equivalent of gas oil at the moment. Because without that Russian supply, all those other countries that were taking Russian supply prior to the Ukrainian strikes, they're looking for other sources of supply now.
yeah, sure.
And
Which is why cracks are so high.
and you
Like you said,
couple that with the Middle East refineries that can't export, the Alzors, the Citra, Ras the Iranian gas oil that can't get out either.
wait, yeah.
And now we've got a massive product shortfall, especially in the distillate realm.
Right,
Um,
just run me through this, sorry, because this is really important. This is why I would attribute at least half of the bid, the fact that gas oil cracks have gone bid to the Russia-Ukraine issue.
oh,
Would you say that's
I would give it more than half. I'd give it 70%.
really?
Yeah.
So regardless of the Middle East conflict, you think gas oil cracks would be well bid because of what's happening here?
Yes.
Okay, so practically, let's talk about this.
And let's caveat that a bit because China's refining complex is not exporting. I think they just received some export licenses here recently,
Yeah.
but the Chinese product exports are well below what they normally were.
Okay, I want to touch on China as a whole. I want to talk about China in a minute because
But
that's
yeah,
a whole nother
well,
conversation.
well, it is another conversation, but it layers into why
Absolutely,
markets are where they're at today.
absolutely. It to me, it's where it all funnels down to.
Yeah, it does.
So let's talk. So okay, practically with your big brain and your knowledge, the situation in Russia is the Ukrainians are firing drones on point to me where the main sort of where the epicenters are of the chokehold, like you said, on Russian energy exports. Like where is
Well,
it?
I mean, you take pretty much every refinery, I think, has been hit. Most of I would say the refining capacity that is west of the Ural Mountains has all
Okay,
been struck.
right. So Urals is hang on. This is Urals here, isn't it? I mean, look, there's so many refineries in Russia,
Yeah.
but let's say you're talking from Kazan down. You're
Yep.
concentrating really here, right?
Yep. Well, and also you have St. Petersburg, Moscow. I mean, those big refining complexes have also been hit.
Right. These are all the refineries, right? So you're talking, I've turned off exports. These are inland refineries and these are ones on the sea. So you're talking here is what's being targeted. Now, when these products are refined, where are they going to load out from? Up in the Baltics,
The Baltics up in the St. Petersburg and Ust-Luga
okay,
and
and
down in the
south
Black
out of
Sea.
Novorossiysk,
Yep. Well,
okay.
that's so not Novosibirsk is mainly a crude, but there's some product exports. But you have a very intensive river network in Russia, and that it's a very nicely developed logistics flow where they actually load small 10 kT ships to bring product from inland refineries through the river network out to the Azov Sea. They also have some
Okay.
pipelines, some truck, and some rail. And so all of that coalesce to move product from the inland refineries to the export locations.
Okay. And plus a rail car system
Yeah,
that's
the rail car, the trucks, but it's primarily rail and ship that move the barrels out.
okay, so this is refinery runs in Russia. Now, obviously, we've got it bouncing back in August. I don't know. Look, these are the 2.5 million barrels a day we've got for July in terms of runs. In May, and I can go back, let's go back last year. You can see by how much refinery runs are down in Russia because of the issues. Is this a seasonal thing? Let's go back over the last.
Well, I'd say go back and just take a look. I mean, refinery runs typically run about 3 million a day.
Yeah. So this time last year, 4.9 million
Sorry,
barrels
5
of
million a day, excuse me.
refinery runs. July this year, it's halved. It's halved. Refined product supply, let's look at that and split this by product. And let's go back over the last 2 years. Look at that. So what you've got is this gradual sort of, well, but from here, it's ground down, isn't it? August, we've obviously got that it's going to pick back up. If we look at some of the events, and this is I'm not allowed to show you this, but you can see how many are down. Just the level of refineries that are being hit unit offline. You can see them all here. Some are planned, some are unplanned. It's this is what, like you said, 70% could be attributed to that, but the market hasn't really. It certainly hasn't commanded the same column space that the Middle East and now the Red Sea issues have attracted, right?
Well, it hasn't because everybody looks at the Middle East and OPEC supply as the main crux of oil markets and not thinking of what other parts of the industry are being impacted. I mean, we've lost a lot of capacity in the Middle East and it hasn't recovered from the post attack or pre-attack levels.
Yeah.
But crude oil has weathered this storm rather nicely because there's a lot of other crude in the market that has come online and it's pushing market and it keeps that pressure down. Now, the big reason why crude oil markets have been as weak as they have been, despite all the geopolitical problems, is China is not buying the same amount of crude today as they were buying 4 or 5 months ago. And China is that swing demand center that is not there at the moment.
Yeah, this is the big thing, isn't it? Look, before I know you really want to talk about China, I want to focus on it, but I want to just ask you one other thing, right? And again, this all funnels down into China essentially. Um, Bab el-Mandeb, right? Bab
Yes.
el-Mandeb, where are we? So can you see uh, you can see the screen again. Using a
Hmm.
lot of screens today, Francois. I'll be very happy. I'm showing Kepler everywhere. Here's Bab el-Mandeb Strait. So just talk us. So end of 2023, we did see quite a few strikes on shipping in through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, right? As you come south out of the Red Sea, and then you're going to go east or wherever you're going to go. Since then, we've had ships saying things like this: armed guard on board, Suez for orders, China crew, armed guards on board, etc., etc. India for orders, all Chinese and armed. The Houthis have said there is a ban on any Saudi-related shipping. So any oil that's going to load out of the refineries here, which is we've got Yanbu, Jeddah, and you've got
Jazan.
Jazan. A significant. Bear in mind that most of the oil that Saudi have been exporting has been coming out of the East-West pipeline. So this means that the Saudis, no one knows how the Houthis are apparently going to enforce it. I don't even want to speculate on that. But what happens now? Shipping all goes north?
Well, I mean, it really is going to depend on what happens with the insurance and everything. I mean, Saudi, the Houthis can threaten, but are the Houthis, have they acted yet? And I think most people are probably going to take the cautious point of, okay, we're going to go north through the Suez Canal and exit that way, which is just going to add another 2 weeks of ton miles to every barrel that loads out of Saudi Arabia.
So anything that's loading out of Saudi Arabia for Yanbu now has to go this way and via the Cape of Good Hope.
I'm sure that's what a lot of them are going to do because they do not want to, no ship owner is going to want to put their crew and their vessel at risk that, oh, they got hit by a drone going through the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb.
Let's just bring up the map here, just without any of the filters on. What we're basically saying is from here is essentially a no-go zone right now of shipping.
Yeah, and that's what it'll become. But I think with the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb, it will have to take the Houthis actually hitting a ship to curtail the transit through Bab el-Mandeb. Because remember back in 2003 when they started this random attacking on vessels, the amount of vessel traffic through Bab el-Mandeb dropped, what, 70, 80%?
Yeah,
What was
yeah.
going through were Russian Shadow Fleet tankers. Those seemed to have a pass. but everything else was pulling away. All the container ships pulled away, and they still haven't really gone in full force yet back into that trade route.
And what, yeah, it's tough, isn't it? Because here's the thing. Every week the situation becomes more bleak.
Well, if the Houthis start attacking ships in Bab el-Mandeb, I mean, I would think that that would put another $4 to $5 back into the flat price of crude upwards
Okay.
because it just adds those longer ton miles, which impacts refinery runs. And so you would see almost, I think, a knock-on effect of not only crude going up, but products going up as soon as there's some type of strike against a vessel going through Bab el-Mandeb.
Okay. All right. So look, I asked you about Ukraine, Russia. Where does that go? What is what has to happen? Like, if we to put an answer around that question, if Ukraine continue to hit Russian refineries, does Vladimir want to get around the table and have that chat with
Well, I
Zelensky?
think he'll be forced. I personally think the economics of that war will eventually force him to come to the table. Um,
And do
now,
you think Donald
the
Trump's going to come under?
the ego of that war is a different animal. But just looking at it from a straight economic standpoint, okay, Ukraine has now started to hit other warehouse facilities inside of Russia, outside, so consumer good warehouses now
Right.
outside of refineries because they've hit all the refineries. Now they got to hit other things. And so they're bringing the economic pressure to the Russian people. Um, Restaurants are closing in Moscow. People don't have the goods they want to have. People are losing their businesses because if they're doing the whole buying from a Chinese supplier and then selling goods into Russia, like a website, a web-based platform, they don't have their supplies anymore because, oh yeah, they blew up 4 or 5 of these warehouses now around the Moscow region.
Mm.
Um, you're hurting the Russian people in the pocketbook. So does that cause a political upheaval in Moscow to force a change in tactic in Ukraine and bring people to the table to stop the insanity of that war? I would hope so.
Because
But
you're right in that I mean, I don't know enough about the politics of it, right? And I don't want to be honest, if I'm brutal. But I just can't see Vladimir Putin doing that. But anyway, regardless of that, does Donald Trump then try and broker a deal?
I don't think Donald Trump has the ability to broker a deal. I think his idea of trying to bring peace to Ukraine and Russia is so far-fetched that I don't think he's got the wherewithal or the power to bring them to a deal because to bring people to a deal, you need to have both sides willing to negotiate and discuss. Every piece of information out of Russia says that they are still maintaining this hardline stance that they're inevitably going to take all of Ukraine. The Donbass is theirs already. Just give up the Donbass and maybe we'll have a ceasefire. Pull all your troops out from Ukraine. And Ukraine is at that point where I don't think they want to have a peace deal that shows that they've given up much of their territory, much more of their territory to Russia. So I think the reality of the floor is that the logistics war that Ukraine has been staging successfully against Russia is working, and Ukraine is going to continue to apply that pressure and potentially even regain some territory as the Russians can't get gas oil to their tanks, can't get ammunition to the front line, can't get other supplies to the front line. Eventually the front line will collapse.
Okay. Onto other cheerful things. The Middle East, obviously, we've covered that as much as we can. Everyone's just keeping their eye on the headlines. I mean, I'm looking at some Iran's Fars news agency citing a military source. Any decision to reopen the Strait of Hormuz depends on security considerations. No shit, Sherlock. It's just it's tit for tat. CENTCOM tenth day of strikes overnight on the same targets to degrade military capability on coastlines, etc., etc. Bahrain and Kuwait then come under attack. We know that's where we are with the Middle East. But if we're talking about energy markets, what's happening? Why flat prices kind of up 20% up in 3 weeks is significant. But let's talk about where everything's funneling down, right? So we want to talk about what's happening in China because let's go China
China crude
imports
imports.
and let's do crude, condensate. Hang on, what am I doing? No, to China. I've got 1,000 barrels a day. We've changed all our settings recently. Okay, so this is just the number of barrels per day of crude that China have been buying over the last 2 years. Do you want to do it 1 year to give you a bit more
Oh no, I
drama?
think the 2 year shows a very good example of where roughly sitting around what 10 million barrels a day, 11 million
Right.
barrels a day.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Deck 2025, 12.1 million barrels a day. That was the highest. June, 6 million, half to what it was in December.
Yeah.
July is a little bit higher, 7.7, but still markedly down from where we were. 5.5 million barrels a day. I don't know. I mean, look, this is predictive because some vessels will have, by the way, our methodology works, AIS is pinging to go east. So we have that as a Chinese import essentially. But it's only at the end of each month that we see. If we're looking at imports, though, I mean, look, that is as low as it has been. If I do 5 years, June, you'd have to go
You'd have to go
to
all the way back into the 1990s, early 2000 to see imports this low.
June. Yeah, look, here's June, 6 million barrels a day. This is all data, so it goes back, we go back 2013. So July 2014 is the lowest, 12 years ago.
Which was at the start of the Chinese Industrial Revolution. I shouldn't say, well, that's a bad, probably bad. Their expansion that they went through, the big commodity bust boom that started with 2010 and moving forward.
Yeah, and look, the country has been able to get on with things as normal. Just the buying patterns that were there were not as strong. So I do think that the reason we're at flat price isn't 100 and 110 is because there is still this underwhelm, this sort of demand scenario that's underwhelming the market, that's not pushing it up to those kind of levels. And there's something else I said in my narrative, in my commentary this morning. I said narratives can change quickly. Announce a ceasefire across even one or two of the fragile choke points, and the conversation shifts overnight from not enough oil to too much. And we might see a $5 a barrel correction, $10 a barrel.
Well, I mean, but if you look at what happened with market structure over the last 45 days, MOU was signed, market structure collapsed, and
Yeah.
we're actually floating with contango
Well, we
on
were
crude
in
oil
container.
markets because there was way too much crude oil in the market. Now we've gone back to steep backwardation in the front end of the curve on crude oil because, okay, now you've got a supply disruption again
Yeah.
going on in the Middle East. But the telling story about China, I love to go back to the whole EV story because again, China is curtailing their own internal demand. I mean, if you do some, I did some back of the envelope calculations, and people can challenge me on this, but it says that China's actual crude demand is about 3 million barrels a day lower than what their imports have been. Because if
Right.
you
I
look
mean
at
that's the metric to really get, isn't it?
Because if you look at their penetration of EVs in their market as well as alternative fuel trucks, and you just say, okay, based on that change in gasoline consumption, you go from 20 liters, 30 liters, 40 liters for a car to zero, and you multiply that over the amount of EVs in their marketplace, depending on how many EVs you want to say are in that market, it's a significant reduction in gasoline need, which says that their actual imports should only be about 8, 9 million barrels a day just to cover their current level of consumption based on the data that I have.
So what's the baseline you're taking? Refinery runs?
Refinery runs. So their actual refinery runs don't need to be as high as they have been. They actually need to be lower. They can be lower
Okay.
and keep the market supplied in China without an issue.
Let's have a look at that just quick. So China, because this is a baseline I think a lot of people aren't looking at. China refinery runs overall. Look, that's been remarkably steady. This goes back 2 years. So it's around, we've got 14 million barrels a day. This is obviously overall. So, and then in July, we've got 11.7. So how much does the country actually need? When you look at that refinery runs versus imports, you can see how much stock they're drawing down from tanks because obviously imports isn't the same data point as refinery runs. because this is taking into account what's in storage by the refinery or drawing down an SPR, whatever it may be. This is the metric to look at rather than imports, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. All right. Well, look, where do we go from here then? Like, it's a tough, what is the next move? Because it seems like 10 days is a long time for a continuous set of strikes from CENTCOM. Is that the new norm? I don't even want to say that, but is that the environment we're in, that CENTCOM ships are attacked in the Strait of Hormuz, CENTCOM strike Iran, Iran strike Bahrain, Jordan, and Kuwait. Bab and Madeb then going to start leveraging. Is this just the new way of life?
Well, I think we're getting to another crux decision point because either A, if the United States is going to maintain this level of kinetic activity, then they need to increase the presence in the Middle East and start bringing in other assets. One
Right.
thing that I haven't seen yet is any movement of long-range bombers into the region to start bombing. Using the missiles off the ships and the aircraft on the ships, that's an expensive proposition over time because eventually those missile systems need to be rearmed or refilled, as
Mm.
well as the ships need to be re-provisioned as they sit there off coast doing their jobs. So to me, if it's going to escalate further, we're going to start seeing the B-52s, the stealth bombers coming over and bombing Iran. If that doesn't happen, then eventually this is going to get to a point of a ceasefire once again. But I think we're kind of in that purgatory world of, is it a ceasefire? Is it kinetic war? Ceasefire, kinetic war. And I think
Mm.
that purgatory world is predicated on the fact that who is actually running Iran? To me, it seems like you've got a governmental authority that doesn't control the IRGC. So if the
Right.
IRGC is not happy, they'll just attack ships and do whatever they want to do. Where the government probably wants to see a stabilized solution at some point where they don't have to be attacked anymore and they can actually generate revenue for the country. So and I think that's the crux of the whole issue here is because Iran is bifurcated and who's in charge, nobody knows. Um, it's a bit of left hand, right hand. Left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
Yeah. And look, I think that's the issue, isn't it? You've got to the point now where since the beginning of May, 450 million barrels has crossed the Strait of Hormuz with the US assistance. That's what CENTCOM have been tweeting. Um, how much is coming out of that? 20 million barrels a day of crude was coming out, or crude and products, something like that.
That
Let's
was
call it 20.
pre-war.
Yeah, pre-war, 20 million barrels a day. So do the math since then. May, June, middle of July, 2.5 months, 20 million barrels a day times by 75, whatever you want to call it, is not normal trade patterns. But the thing is, and we say this so many times, the ceasefire has to be around what is the navigable path through the Strait of Hormuz. Insurance, ship owners, agents, whoever need to say, that's fine, we agree. And there has to be a monitoring of how that is enforced. Then we're back to a normal environment. Then things start to calm down. But we seem further away on that agreement than we were
Well,
even yesterday.
since Trump opened the Pandora's box of can Iran control the Straits of Hormuz with the ill-timed and ill-thought attack against Iran, I mean, that's what's happened. Is that okay? Iran is now trying to enforce that they control the Straits of Hormuz,
Yeah,
despite all the UN clauses and anything else and the legality of it all. Legal is how big is your gun and how often can you use it? That's legal in the Straits right now. And
yeah,
Iran has proven, okay, we've got a big gun and we can shoot it and we can use it many times. Stop us. I mean, that's the whole thing.
yeah. That's where we
So
are.
unless you can get Iran to curtail this kinetic activity against civilian merchant shipping and stop attacking ships willy-nilly who don't follow their rules,
Mm.
um, we won't have stability there. So either A, Iran's got to stop or they're going to be forced to stop. And I don't think the United States has the wherewithal currently or the willpower currently to force them to stop. They'll put up a good show, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. No, I
So,
agree. And it's just going to be. I've seen less tweets recently from Donald Trump. Maybe that's summer. I don't know. We've got a new UK Prime Minister, whatever that means. Who knows? But look, flat price, high 80s. Think it's going to stay here for a while. I think, people are building sandcastles, but more than ever is the phone or tablet next to that sandcastle building that it ever has been before, because people need to keep an eye on what's going on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, good to see you. I'm in London next week. You're away as well, right? So
Yep, up in
we'll catch.
Estonia, visiting the our production facilities up there. So
Nice.
another one. So yeah, look for another 2 week potential break here between the Smoking Barrel. Then we got APEC coming up in
Yeah, we have.
Singapore,
Yeah,
and
I'm around most of August, so
those
let me.
conversations will be interesting.
Who knows where we are in a month? A month's a long time in this market.
Yeah, the
All
month
right.
is like a year, and this year is like a decade.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Nice one, mate.
All right, everybody, stay safe. Click like, comment, and subscribe, and look forward to seeing you on the next round of these Smoking Barrel.
Ciao.